Okay. And so, as I mentioned, I'm really only going to use the pen at the beginning. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and just draw my ball. And I'm just going to draw the ball, but to do motion tweens, I have to convert my drawing into what's called a symbol. A symbol is sort of like a shape, but it uses data that we created instead of the built-in shapes. So I'm actually going to lock my first ball layer, and there's also like a little eyeball. I might turn it off at some points if it's distracting or whatever. For now, I'll just leave it there. I'm going to make a new layer and name this ball 2. And you're going to see that by default, Animate is going to make my layer like take up the entire length of the animation. We can like change this and stretch this out and do different stuff with this. I'm going to turn off loop for now and just leave this. I also probably won't use the onion skin for this style of animation because I don't really need to like follow from one frame to the next. Adobe is going to like do all that work for me. So I'm going to turn the onion skin off. So I'm just going to draw my new ball over here. I'm going to hit Y to get my paintbrush. Let's take a look at our properties. Maybe I'll do a different color. So let's do like a, let's do like a reddish pink color. See, there's something weird going on where it thinks the mouse is like with some of these things, like the mouse is not really where it thinks it is. It's very weird. Okay, let me just choose my color picker. Oh wait, I want to do, is it gonna work over here? No, something weird is going on. Okay. Alright, we'll just use that. I think that's something between the projector and the screen is messing up some stuff, but that's okay. It seems to only affect like the windows. I'm going to make the stroke size a little bit bigger. I'll do like 12. Okay, so let's draw my ball. So this is my new ball. And I'm not really going to do anything else with this. Like I'm pretty much done with the pen for now. You can use the pen, obviously, to edit the frames. But if you're more used to using a mouse, it's going to be easier. So I'm going to move the timeline up a little bit and then zoom back out. So I'm going to hit Control 2. And then I just want to select everything that I want to be part of my symbol. So everything that I want to add my tween animation to. And so to create a symbol, I'm going to right click here and click Convert to Symbol. There's also a key command for that, F8. So I'm going to convert this to a symbol, and I'm going to call this ball 2, since it's ball 2. And then a couple things I want to set here. The type, I don't want a movie clip, I want a graphic. That's going to give me the ability to do these motion tweens. So I'm going to change that to graphic. And then for registration point, this doesn't matter that much, but I like to put it in the middle. I tend to think of a ball as having like a middle point rather than like a top left point. So I usually change the registration point for circular objects to the middle. Probably for most symbols I would do that. There's some stuff in here I don't really care about, so I'm going to click OK. So now we have this ball, and it's actually saved as part of our library. So if I like deleted it, I could get it back. I could go to my library and grab this ball and drag it, and now we have it back. So when you add a symbol, it's going to save it into your library. I can probably like make copies of this and do other stuff. Like, yeah, I can duplicate it, I could change the color, do different things. So it's almost like I have my own little shape that I can use wherever I want now. So this is called a symbol. I think I can edit the symbol too, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to put my symbol here. And now you can see there's like a little dot. That means it's a keyframe. And so if you watch, if I play this back, it just sits there, right? I haven't added any animation. And if I move it like over here and play it back again, notice that suddenly it goes over there. So when I move it, it's going to add keyframes. If I go to this frame and I take my symbol, what's it doing? won't let me move. Okay, let's try a different one. It's not letting me move it. Maybe I have to do this? No. Oh, maybe I have to hit... Oh, there we go. Maybe I can move it now. Yeah, okay. If I make a new keyframe, then I can move it. And now if I play it back, it's just kind of moving around. So it saves the changes that I'm making to it, but it's just jumping from one place to the next. So what we want to do is like make it animate smoothly. So I'm going to undo those. I can also just delete the keyframe. So if I click on a keyframe and right click, there's all these options here. If I hit clear keyframe, that'll leave the animation that long, but it'll take out that data. And so the keyframes basically save data about that particular frame. The data that it saves, if you click on our symbol, let's go back to the first frame. If we click on our symbol and you look at the object data, all of these numbers we can animate. So these are all the properties of the object that we can animate over time. So there's position and size, color, there's other stuff down here. We're really going to be looking at position and size. So we're going to be moving it around, and Adobe's going to save where the different positions are, and then we can animate in between. So when I'm setting up a keyframe animation or a motion animation, first I have to right click on the symbol. This is whacked out. Why can't, there we go. I don't know why, there's something weird about the mouse in here. Anyway, I right click on the symbol and I'm gonna go to, where is it? Oh, it's all the way at the top. Create motion tween. So what I want to use is a motion tween. This basically is going to save all the data. It's going to create keyframes where it saves data when I move the thing around. So when I click create motion tween, the color changes here. And if I double click on this here, you'll see that there's like a big graph here. We're going to look back at this in a second. You don't really have to use that much, but it is helpful. So now, if I move the playhead is this like blue thing. Let's move the playhead to 10. And I'm going to turn off the other ball for now because I don't want to look at that. If I move this ball down here, notice a little dot appeared. Okay, let's do that again. All I do is I have to move it. If I make any change to this ball, a little dot is going to appear. And you can also see each one of these dots here represents points along this line. And so now, when I play this back, I have a little animation. So all I did is I had my starting point here and my next point here, and Adobe fills in the rest of the information for me. So that's a tween. It's filling in between my two keyframes. So my first keyframe is here. My second keyframe is this little dot here, and it's just moving it down. The nice thing about this is I can actually edit this thing. I can just like drag this over here, and it just moves the whole thing over. So I can grab the whole thing and move it around. I can also grab little points. So I can like go like this, and now it's going to go like that. Okay, I don't really want that right now, but I could do it. And then I can also move my points up, so it'll be faster up here, or actually slower. It's a little hard to get it exactly right. So if I move my points up like this, the farther away they are, that's going to be faster because there's more movement in between frames. The closer they are, that's going to be slower. That's less movement in between frames. So let me grab this and do that. So see how there's like a little bit, it's faster at the beginning, or it's actually slower at the beginning, but it's moving less, and then it speeds up as it goes down. The distance between those frames gets larger. That's not really the subject for today. That's something we're going to talk about next week, but just so you can see, you can manipulate those points. Okay, so now we want to go back up to where we started. And so as I mentioned again, I'm going to be spending a lot of time in the timeline because I'm going to be manipulating these keyframes. So what I can do is I can drag this keyframe all the way over here, and now, or let's drag it back one. Now we have that keyframe back at the beginning. Okay, maybe I did that wrong. Maybe I have to hit a button. Okay. If I hit Control and do that, does it work? No.
No, you just have to change it.
You just, yeah, I thought you just had to drag it.
There you go.
There we go. I don't know what I did the first time. I think I went too far. Okay, so now it's going to bounce and go back up. And so now it's kind of hard to see, but I have more points in here. Let's zoom in a little bit. So I'm going to hit Control 1. So there's more points in here. It's hard to see which is which because they're the same color. I could like stretch them out and then look. Okay, so this is going down. And this is coming back up. And I can still, if I click in the right place, which is kind of hard to do, but if I click in the right place, maybe if I select like that, I can drag this thing over like this. Okay, so it's not a very realistic animation because it's just like going down and then up. You know, if I like preview this, it doesn't look like gravity is acting on the ball. It just looks like it's like a switch or like a mechanical thing or something like that. So again, we're going to work on timing later, so I'm not going to talk too much about it today. But we can also, so we've got our motion, but we can also do our squash and stretch. This is a little bit trickier, but essentially if I use this other tool, the free transform tool, which is the Q key, I can, well actually first I want to select my symbol, then I can use the free transform tool. And now I can squash and stretch my ball as it goes down. I can also drag, I'm going to drag this keyframe here over a little bit. So it's going to fall faster and then go back up. So I can move that keyframe around. And so now let's stretch it out. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to stretch it up and down. It's kind of stretching my stroke. There's probably a way to turn that off. I know there is, but I can't remember what it is. Anyway, I don't care right now that much. Okay, so now it's animating my squash. But, actually, that's pretty much what I want. That's pretty good. So now I have my squash. As gravity's pulling the ball down, it's dragging it down. There's some weird artifacts, but I think that's just because we're in preview mode. Yeah. It looks more like a rubber band, but that's okay. Okay, so I've got my squash, but then when I hit the ground, I want a lot of stretch. So I'm going to stretch it out and then flatten it. And we want to keep in mind, it's good to exaggerate, but we don't want to exaggerate too much. You kind of have to just play around with it until you get it right. Okay, so now we've got this guy, but now it's not stretching on the other side anymore. So now we have to do our stretch again. And so we're going to move our keyframe maybe here and stretch it again. So I'm just changing the scale. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So it looks a little goofy. It's a little like, you know, static. It's a little like plasticky, but we have the basic idea, and then we can start to play around with these keyframes. You know, maybe if I move this keyframe here, that'll look better. Not really. I don't really have enough frames, but anyway, I can keep playing around with this. I don't need to take forever for the demo, but you guys can work on kind of making it look the way you want it to. One thing, I'm going to go into this more next week, but if you double click on this, now that we've created some animation, you're going to see these crazy lines. You can have a little bit more control over your animation. This is called like the graph editor. So we have this like whole graph, and we can see these different things. So like if I want to just look at the X, I can select that, or just look at the Y. So the X location is pretty much staying the same the whole time. It's not moving horizontally. So we can pretty much ignore the X. I think I can even just delete this if I want to. Can I delete this? It's not letting me. Yeah, I can. I don't think it'll delete the other ones though. Anyway, I can delete those points if I want to. With the Y, uh-oh, did I delete the whole thing? There's the Y. It goes up and down. That makes sense because we're really going down on the Y-axis and then back up. And so we can see what that graph looks like, and I can edit it here. I don't really want to do this right now, but I can if I want. And then there's something, whoops, in here, there's this button called Add Ease. We'll talk about this more throughout the semester, but easing is essentially changing the slope of the animation. So instead of going straight, we're going to ease into something or ease out of something. So it's pretty easy to add. There's a lot of complexity that you can do with easing, but let's just do a quick one. Let's do stop and start slow. So this is subtle, but it's gonna ease into it, and then it's gonna ease out of it. And so that changes this sort of curve of the animation. And so if we watch that, you can see it kind of starts a little slower and then speeds up and then slows down a little bit. I'm going to go back to no ease for now. But you can also play with it. You can add dots and do all this different stuff. Depth we're not going to worry about. We're not going to change the depth. Then you have your transform down here. We're not rotating anything. You can obviously animate the rotation. We are not skewing anything. We're just scaling stuff. So there's the X scale. That's squashing in. And then here's the Y scale. That's, or I guess the X one is where we're stretching. We're stretching the ball. And then the Y is where we're squashing when we hit the ground. Although that could change if the ball was moving sideways or whatever. And so again, I can edit these points. I can drag them around and kind of like make the animation look exactly how I want to. But you don't have to. This is like kind of an extra level of detail that you can get into if you want to. Okay. So there we go. We can bring our other ball back and we can loop it and take a look, or I can preview it. So they actually look pretty similar right now. That's okay. The assignment is to do things that look kind of different. So if I wanted to do something a little different, I would have to make it not squash as much, not stretch as much. There's different ways that I could make this look a little bit different. Okay. One other thing that I'll go over really quickly, since we do have a good amount of time left. Something that I like to do, and that I think is more common these days, is one thing that we can do once we've mapped out the animation that we want using the tweens, using Adobe to kind of help us create an animation. In theory, I would spend a lot more time on this, like really nailing the timing and getting everything to look exactly right. But for now, just for the demo, I'm just going to go straight to this point. I can use Adobe's animation, but add frame by frame on top, right? So it's basically like what you might call rotoscoping, except it's not video. So what I could do, I'm going to lock ball number 2. I'm going to duplicate this layer. So I'm going to right click on here and duplicate. And then I'm going to name this ball 3 guide. Okay, I'm going to talk about guides a little bit more again next week. But what I can do with this guide is if I right click on this and I say this is a guide, it won't show up in my final render. Okay. Oh, I still have to go over rendering. Don't forget to go over rendering. So anyway, I'm going to take this this guide ball and I'm going to move it over here if it'll let me. Oh, it's still locked. Whoops. Okay. Let's move this. Nope. Let's grab the whole thing and move it over here. And that's my guide. Okay, so when I run this, the guide doesn't show up, but I can see it. Okay, so guides are really useful because now what I can do, I'm going to lock my guide. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this ball 3. And now I just have to make this not super long. Just go this frame here. and I can do my whole ball animation over again. I'm going to get my paintbrush back. I'm going to do this really quickly. I'm going to just make this stroke black, which I can't, I don't know what, there we go. And now I can rotoscope my animation that Adobe created for me. I can just draw over it and go frame by frame. I'm just hitting F7 again to create new frames. And so this is a combination of the two. I'm letting Adobe figure out the animation for me using motion tweening. But now I'm going back in and going frame by frame, or I could go every other frame or do other stuff. So now I get a nice combination of my hand-drawn look with the Adobe tween animation. So again, you don't have to do this, but this is what my process, although I don't use Animate in my own work, I tend to use Blender. But this is more like similar to what I might do if I was working on something like this. But of course, one of the ways that you start to develop your own style is by playing around with your software and trying different things so that what you get out of it looks different than what you've seen before, because you don't want your animation to look like every other animation that you've ever seen. Okay, so now I have my own version of this, except instead of the yucky, plasticky looking Adobe stretching and squashing, I have my own nice hand-drawn thing. And if I go back here, you can see the guide goes away. So that's how I do some things sometimes. Of course, you don't have to do it that way. I recommend you come up with your own process. Okay, I'm going to save this. I'm going to stop this recording, and I'm going to start a new one.